Our next panel is coming up. It is our Growth in Idaho panel. Scott Shaner from Raffinelli and Nahas will be moderating our forum. We'll have Tommy Alquist from BVA Development, Clay Carley from Old Boise, Neil Nelson from ESI Construction, Megan Ronk from Idaho Power, and David Turnbull from Brighton Corporation. Look forward to their comments.
Thanks, everyone, and good morning. First, I'd like to thank Justin for pronouncing my name right. I've been married for a little over 25 years, and my wife still struggles with it, so I appreciate that. Today, we're going to talk about growth, some of the issues around growth. I know there's a lot of frustrations with growth. You know, traffic sucks, and parking's tough, and the value of my home keeps going up, and I want to buy something new. I've got a little bit of a different perspective. I grew up, I spent my first 25 years in Detroit. I've spent my last 25 years here. So I was in Detroit in the 60s and 70s. Big three automakers are laying everyone off. Hard to get a job, unemployment at an all-time high. Traffic wasn't a problem. There was parking everywhere. Home prices are plummeting. So the point just being that, you know, growth's painful, but the opposite's more painful. So let's launch into our questions. I've got some questions here, and then we'll just see where it flows. Let's start with you, Neil.
I knew that was going to happen.
Construction costs have been going up for 40 straight months. Any relief in sight?
Has it been 40? It doesn't seem like
40 straight months.
Yeah, my short answer is, not in the immediate future. In the next 24 to 36 months, we don't see any, concessions on construction pricing, and it's really it's a two-part issue, really. The first part being labor. You saw Wes's slide on the growth in the valley. I wonder how many of those people are plumbers or electricians. Not many. So the line at the DMV is still a couple hundred people every morning, and we're really not getting more craft or trade into the valley. We don't have a viable trade school in the valley yet. Northern Idaho does, and they've started that, and that's getting better. But the other factor on the labor side is we still pay the lowest wages to our craft, all surrounding states. So Washington, Oregon, Utah, Montana, they all pay a higher wage for the trades than we do. So we're still having a lot of craft leaving the valley where we have population coming in. So we still see a shortage on the labor side, and I don't have an answer for that. Our industry is trying to fix that in a number of different ways, but in the foreseeable future, I don't see our labor side getting better. The second part of the equation is the material side, and that's more complicated. It's affected by tariffs. We lump it all into construction pricing, but if you look at a simple one that was brought to my attention in the last month or so was washing machines. So there's a tariff on washing machines, and so Samsung actually had to build a factory in South Carolina. But overall, in the last 18 months, the prices of a washer and dryer have gone up almost $300 per pair. So when you put that in community living, assisted living, multifamily, it all drives that up into the six figures. So, we're seeing some moderate leveling, I would call it, among steel, gyp, aluminum, copper, getting a little, less than double-digit increases every year. But for the most part, I don't see it backing down. I like to tell people, when someone asks me, when do we build, I tell them now, because I don't see our tax structure getting better than it is now, and I don't see our interest rates getting better. So if you want to wait, you can, but it might get worse on the construction pricing side.
So if you think about, if you divide it between materials and labor, going forward the next 12 or 18 months, which one's going to be our bigger problem?
Well, certainly, I feel like it's labor because it affects the duration of a project for us. When we have less skilled craft working on them, so it's gonna take us longer, and just across the board, that's not a statewide thing. That's a national problem, and we're seeing that with our industry partners when we look at everything from the Northeast all the way over to California. Generally, that's what's happening is projects are extending, especially the more complex ones, just because we have lack of skilled workers. So I continue to feel like labor is where it's at. Some of that's because the material pricing is a bit out of our control. I mean, I can't tell you what we're going to charge, cost per yard of concrete will be. I can tell you in the next 18 months. I can't tell you 36 months out. I mean, we used to pay, $85 a yard for concrete 15 years ago. And I think this year we're paying $105.
Okay, Great, thanks. David, you've done development all the way from Barber Valley all the way out to the west side of the valley. What do you see going forward the next few years, the hot spots in the valley, and why do you see those as being hot spots?
Well, we have 4 new mayors in this valley, so it seems like there's plenty of heat to go around. It's from tip of valley to end of valley. You take a look at the I-84 corridor with what Boyer's doing on the east side. Tommy's just launching a new project way over on the west side of I-84, and everywhere in between. I drove by the Amazon facility yesterday, and I thought, that's not a project you measure in square feet, that's cubic feet, right? It's just massive. All along the I-84 corridor is a big story. Obviously, we're doing a lot at 10 Mile. I think we've got, Tommy, about 500,000 square feet of office and 250,000 square feet of multifamily under construction right now. We're also working with Tommy out at Eagle View, and then, so all up and down the I-84 corridor. Chinden, everywhere from Linder Village with the new Winco, Costco at 10 Mile. We've got another project with Tommy at Central Valley at the Highway 16 Chinden intersection. So that's going to be a hot corridor. And then residential is spread throughout the valley. Meridian continues to be the hot spot for residential, but everywhere is experiencing more residential growth than they have for some time. It's interesting, though, our single-family production still isn't up to where 2005 levels were. And people look around and think that couldn't be the case, but we're not really approaching 2005 levels yet. The reason we've got an affordability problem is simple supply and demand. We just have not produced enough single-family housing. Multifamily housing is becoming a bigger component of it as a percentage of the overall, but that's a demographic shift as well as a purchasing preference shift. And then there's an affordability issue too. You can talk to people in your own offices that are having a hard time affording the kind of, a single family home if that's what they're wanting to get. So it's pretty well spread out throughout the valley, but then you have key corridors that I think are the current hotspots and will continue to be for some time.
So just to follow up.
And not to mention what you're doing downtown. Yeah. Of course, downtown's been dominated recently by hospitality and multifamily, but then what Tommy's doing at Pioneer Crossing and what you're building right now, the demand is everywhere.
Just one quick follow-up real quickly on the whole supply and demand, because I agree with you. Why aren't we building enough homes? I mean, we've got big builders like you guys and all these big builders out there. It seems like they're building as fast as they can. Is it labor shortage, or why are we not keeping up? Or is the influx just too massive for us to keep up?
Yeah, it's largely a labor issue and an entitlement issue. Yeah, there's areas that could be opened up for more development that would help, bring more supply into the market, would help the affordability issue. But we're running into political headwinds right now.
So everyone's been talking about affordable housing. Clay, you're going to break ground on an affordable housing project here in a couple months. So what do you think we need to do? I mean, we're going to have an increasing demand for affordable housing in the valley. What do we need to do to meet that demand?
Yep, Scott, thanks for the softball. It's kind of complex, so I chose my words carefully, and I don't want to omit any of them. The key word is inventory, and Dave alluded to it. But when demand exceeds supply, prices rise for buyers and renters. So inflated prices means increased sprawl and increased homelessness. That's just what happens. And those affect everybody, not just those that want to buy or rent something that they can't immediately afford. And land and construction costs aren't going to decline in the near future. So how does a community create increased inventory enough to lower pricing is the question and the key. So first and foremost, in my opinion, is to develop a shared vision valley-wide where housing belongs and fund adequate public facilities to accommodate the new residential development. So today we tend to operate in strict silos, and each community wants to do it the way they want to do it, and that's a recipe for disaster long term. So a shared vision on where these people are going to go and all the uses are going to go is crucial. So already fully developed infrastructure is the highest priority. Create higher density, but be sensitive about neighborhood characteristics. So, where you have roadways, where you have that basic infrastructure in place, that's where you want to focus your first ability to develop. Adequate public facilities isn't just sewer, power, and roadways. It includes an efficient and equitable public transit system. This region must pressure the state, the legislature, to legislate new dedicated funding for proper public transit. We don't have it, and we need it desperately, or we will repeat the folly of every community before us in North America. So we have a linear valley, which is ideal for establishing public transit, and we have a rail corridor smack dab in the middle, bisecting each major municipal core. We have great bones with a great and ideal layout. Now we need funding to execute, which requires community support and political will. Coordinating resources with a goal of increasing inventory to lowering home prices, to me, is crucial. And who can participate? Everybody involved on the governmental side, including developers. So all the municipalities can participate, the counties and the state, and of course the private developers. So what can they do? First, take a complete inventory of their land holdings and identify parcels suitable for residential development. And that means all those governmental agencies. They have a lot of land they've forgotten that they've had, and it's a detriment to the community to not be using it appropriately. Develop a plan to dispose of the land for housing development and create incentives for developers to do the right thing. So land write-down is a tool that's available to the government. Fee abatement, if you add up traffic impact fees, there are, for every housing project, there's park fees, police fees, fire fees, sewer fees, permitting fees. Those quickly add up to at least 5% of the cost of the project. If you really want to increase inventory and you want to do it in specific targeted locations like transit-oriented development, you have to think seriously about abating those fees, which our state legislature needs to get involved in order to do that. And property tax abatement. That is the most popular tool used nationwide to stimulate housing, and we don't have the ability to abate property tax. So that could be for a first-time home buyer or a home buyer in a location where it's desired, or it could be for a developer of multifamily. And it's targeted for a location, it's targeted for a short period of time to stimulate that activity in that area, and then it goes away. So it's not a permanent tax abatement. And create a 501c3 housing fund to seek funding from all sources listed above. And the city of Boise is working on that now, and I think that's something that should be coordinated and thought about by all the agencies and the community as a whole. And then lastly, I would say combat NIMBYism. The business and public leaders of the Valley need to be at the forefront of this issue and compel the press and the community to address this issue. There cannot be any opposition to growth. It is inevitable and going to continue. Being opposed to growth is like being opposed to a recession. Good luck with that.
Thanks, Clay. So Megan, at the risk of sounding like an advertisement for Idaho Power does a great job of providing uninterrupted power at an extremely low cost compared to other places we do business. Question is, what's Idaho Power doing to prepare for this explosive growth? Are you guys going to be able to handle this growth in the Valley?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'll kind of speak to that topic for wearing a couple of different hats. Obviously I work for Idaho Power, but I have a little broader perspective in my past work at the state level through the Department of Commerce and working in economic development, for the past 15 plus years. And, as I have the opportunity to work with site selectors and, other folks that are looking at Idaho more broadly for growth and expansion. I mean, as has been talked about in the previous panel and touched on in this panel, that infrastructure part of the equation has become increasingly important. So, trying to make sure that we develop creative solutions that fit within Idaho's philosophy to address transportation, water and sewer system improvements, broadband. And I really think it's those communities that are able to kind of figure out the secret sauce of getting that right that are going to continue to be successful into the future. I even look at communities like Cuna and Mountain Home that are kind of right outside the edge of the valley that, I think are working towards some infrastructure improvements, because as we see RFIs come through for new projects, that whole concept of site readiness or certified sites where all of the infrastructure is in place and ready to go and sort of that speed to market, I think is, again, more important than ever. And I have certainly seen on the energy side much more desire for customers to understand where their energy is coming from. You know, certainly we have a great story to tell with our costs. And if you look across the nation, we've got our business costs being around 30% lower than many other utilities throughout the country. You know, reliability will always be important, but the source of energy and working with customers to help meet their renewable and sustainable initiatives is increasingly important, and I think will continue to be so in the future. And whether that's using energy efficiency incentives to lower costs for individual customers and more broadly to customers by not having to build new resources into the future, which it's interesting that Idaho Power is probably one of the few companies that actually encourages people and incentivizes them to use less of our product. But I think also looking at clean energy and how we compete with other locations throughout the country. I think we have a great story to tell with our current energy mix that we have this beautiful gift of hydroelectric power. We have a lot of wind and solar development happening throughout the state. And I think we're going to have to continue to be creative in how we meet the needs of our, especially our large commercial and industrial users into the future. And so we're excited to play a part in that.
And do I have this right? You have a new renewable energy goal to be totally renewable by, what's the date?
2045.
2045.
So yes, we've set a goal of being 100% clean by 2045. I think that's certainly an ambitious goal, but as we started to look across the country and, again, the energy mix that we already offer, it made sense, and we were the first investor-owned utility to do so, to make that type of statement without a government mandate. And so, again, I think we have a great story to tell. Certainly on the energy side, but I think we're going to have to continue to broadly work together throughout the state and this valley on infrastructure as a whole to make sure that we're prepared for that growth and that infrastructure doesn't become the barrier.
Great, thanks. So Tommy, you've been involved in both bringing some companies here to Boise and also helping some existing companies expand in Boise. What are your thoughts on the 2 or 3 or 4 things that we need to be doing here in the valley to help make sure that we get more than our fair share of those good companies with high-paying jobs compared to other lifestyle cities like a Salt Lake or a Denver?
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be here, and I couldn't agree more with a lot of the panelists and what they've said. It's an interesting question, and I do want to hit on this growth thing because before this meeting, I just called Nora Carpenter. Many of you know her with United Way, and I just said, hey, give me the update on what the Alice population is doing right now. So that's asset limited, income constrained, but employed, working poor. And 40% of the residents in the Treasure Valley fall within the working poor demographic. Anyone that thinks we don't need any more growth, we need better jobs. We need better jobs in Idaho. And I think I also look to this group and the business owners that are here. Think about how resilient this country is. We live in the greatest country in the history of this planet, and think of where we were just, think of 2008. We've come to these BOMA things for a long time, and we were all in the fetal position wondering what we were going to do. And it wasn't government that pulled us out of this. It was entrepreneurs. It was people that really dug in and said, how do I make my business work? And now we're thriving, and immediately all you hear everywhere is this negativity of there's too much growth, there's too much growth. We need smart growth. Trust me, we need to do things right. We need to fund things right. I mean, Clay and I could probably go on for hours here on what we need to be doing. And unfortunately, we may not do many of those things, but I have all the confidence in the world that it'll be the business leaders, it'll be businesses that will solve these problems going forward. And we will drag government along. That's just the way it works. We need better infrastructure. We need smart infrastructure. We need public transportation. Because if we do those things, we will continue to attract jobs. Our company, and I'm really proud of our company, we've signed 652,000 square feet in office leases in the last 18 months. That's a lot of people. Those are good companies and good jobs. We went through the list of those leases. Most of those companies have high family wage jobs that are here in the valley, either companies growing or companies that are moving here. There's a lot of, we had a lot of, if you think back to the recession, we talked a lot about the talent pipeline. Where was all the talent going to come here? So even if we had capital, even if we had smart buildings and we were a great place to live, what was the talent pipeline going to be? that talent is coming from out of state. We have multiple examples of companies that have picked up their entire company, all their employees from the coast, and said, hey, we're moving to Boise. So I think we need to keep Idaho, Idaho. I think we need to invest in infrastructure. I think we need to be really, really smart about how we I'm worried right now. What happens in a community when this happens? There's this we don't want any more growth. Regulation will cause an affordability problem. It will exacerbate the problem. And you do have new mayors and you have all these new local governments that are saying, hey, let's over-regulate now. Let's go regulate our way to affordability. That will never work. You will create an affordability problem that is exacerbated beyond belief if we continue to regulate and try to have government solve this problem. We need to unleash, like Clay said, the free market and have more housing options and not less. And that's, unfortunately, we see it almost everywhere we go, is that we're having that regulation discussion. So I'm super optimistic. I think we'll solve our problems. I think this room here will continue to solve problems. And I think we need to be at the forefront of telling the story and being involved civically to try to help keep regulation down, keep free markets open, and really encourage our elected official to invest in the infrastructure that we all know we desperately need.
One thing that, and I think Clay mentioned it in the earlier panel, that we're seeing is a lot of the companies that are moving here with back office kind of workers, right? And obviously for the lower labor than you'd have in some other markets. The question I have is, let's look at the talent pipeline. I'll open this up to anyone who wants to comment on it. But as I talk to companies that are looking to come here and hire, high wage earners, software engineers, people like that, the frustration is always, where am I going to find 100 software engineers? Where am I going to find them and steal them?
If you go back, any of you can remember when HP came to town, they brought the talent with them in large measure. So that's part of the equation. We have to do a better job of raising our own talent pool and increasing the skills of the people that are underskilled or underemployed right now. But the talent will come here because they find it a great place to live. They're clamoring to get out. When we bring some of these companies here, Tommy, you know this, they're often saying, we got another division. Now that they've been there and seen it, they want to come. Our whole management team wants to come. So that's part of the equation. We import the talent too.
I will say sometimes we're too hard on ourselves too. Think of CWI. Think of what Bert Gland and that they've done in a very short amount of time. We do need a trade school desperately. If we don't figure out how to get more trades here, that's also part of the problem. And then I think higher education. You look at Boise State with both President Custra and now President Trump of really trying to connect and do the best they can to keep Idaho kids and these kids that come here to our state working here. I think we're all working towards that, but I just think it's less of a problem than we thought it would be because it's so attractive to be here. We are not going to stop the demand on people coming here. All we can do is do a really good job of infill development and trying to create an environment that stays Idaho in the middle of this. It's a real worry for all of us, I think, but also I think we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I was actually speaking with a CEO of a company that just moved a division here, and they moved it from Seattle, and they were expecting that out of 10 people, they'd have 3 or 4 that would move with the company. They've had 7 out of 10 people move. If you could imagine that, that means only 3 people were so tied to Seattle with an aging parent or a spouse that had a wonderful job or something that they couldn't move. And that's almost amazing. I mean, that's almost 100%. I mean, except for the people who are really tied there. That's shocking.
Scott, I want to add to this if I can. So I think that companies and individuals that the talent that we want look at Boise. We rank very highly just on that quality of life issue and desirability. But underneath that layer of skin is what else is in this society that's good or bad compared to where else they can be. So it's an equitable and balanced community. And if you look at our metrics of transportation, education, and healthcare, they're poor compared to a lot of other areas where they can move to and operate from. And I think we need to really focus on becoming a more balanced and equitable community if we really want to attract the right talent.
I think we also have to, just like, if I could jump in, remember that, we're here in the Treasure Valley, but I mean, there's some really similar success stories over in the Magic Valley. Mm-hmm. Certainly has experienced a significant amount of growth, and up in Coeur d'Alene, and that valley as well. I mean, they're really struggling with some of the same issues of talent pipeline, workforce, and so it's really leveraging the lessons learned across all regions of the state to be able to address this problem. Because there's some good things happening in other parts of Idaho as well.
So Neil, let's turn that to the trades then. You know, if everyone wants to move to Boise, why can't I find a plumber?
Well, because they're busy. They're working for us. In fact, we just started a new program. It's called the Puppy Cuddle. And if you refer a tradesman to us, we give you a free puppy. So just take that. We'll be getting puppies later this afternoon.
I don't think that'll increase the supply.
Well, no, it is an issue, and it's simple, supply and demand. And you think about this higher K through 12, and you look at a graduating senior class from pick any of the bigger 5 or 6 schools. You know, they have a 95 to 98% go-on rate, and they're not going on to the trades. I mean, we're recruiting in rural Idaho to figure out if the folks that aren't going on, but we're picking up 10% that aren't going on. Everybody else is going on to higher ed. And we need to create a career path for people so they can see that vision of like, listen, if I do go into the trade, I can be, you know, out of the working poor, and I can be at a place that's a good spot. You know, a typical tradesman can fly to Vegas and work 4 tens and have a better income than we can provide here, having them work 6 days a week. So those wages are starting to come up. We've seen them come up in the last 24 months. But until that balances out a little bit, we're going to continue to see that shortage. And I personally don't see that correcting in the next 2 to 4 years.
Thank
So
you.
Scott, just one point. You know, we live in a conservative state, right? But there's sort of a false conservatism that we need to understand here. And a false conservatism is one that refuses to invest in its resources, in its people, and in its infrastructure. So we got to get past that paradigm. Politically in this room, you know, we just don't take advantage of the tools that should be available to, our local municipalities aren't given the tools to invest. And now we're talking about more restrictions that are, you know, being talked about in the legislature. And we need to be talking to our legislators and tell them, look, we need investment in our people. We need investment in our communities. We don't need that dictated from on high.
Yeah, I just want to quickly tag on. Our only funding tool today really is based on property tax and bonding at a supermajority. And that is no way to build a future for this community.
I'm sorry, I've got to cut it off there, or Jana's going to drag me off the stage. But thank you, everyone, and that was good discussion.